How's it going, Magic players? My name is Alex. Surely you can call me Yoxie Cola or the Cola. Don't call me Shirley. Today I have a very fun video for you. I am showing you guys my Scarab God deck tech. The Scarab God deck that I have had for many years now. And of all the games of Magic the Gathering I've played, Commander games, this is probably the deck that I've used the most. It's really fun. It's just you can win through drain effects, you can win through overwhelming forces of zombies. It's everything that you want from a zombie deck. So, without further ado, take a look at what I got and let me know what you think. Thank you. So, this is a deck that I have had for a really long time, and it's gone through a ton of changes. The commander is now the Scarab God, 3 colorless, a blue, and a black. It is a legendary creature god, and it's a 5/5. At the beginning of your upkeep, each opponent loses X life, and you scry X, where X is the number of zombies you control. We are going to be making a ton of zombies with this deck. There are a ton of zombie creators, and there are things that are going to buff up our zombies as well. But also, I think the more interesting ability is the pay 2 mana plus a blue and a black to exile target creature card from a graveyard, create a token copy of it, except it's a 4/4 black zombie. So the Scarab God can create zombies for you out of anybody's graveyards. You can get some really cool enter the battlefield effects. I have a few in this deck, but that's not what the deck is built around. It's built around zombie tribal, big scary zombie horde going and attacking everyone. But you can easily win by draining your opponents with the Scarab God and similar effects. The Scarab God also has, when the Scarab God dies, return it to its owner's hand at the beginning of the next end step. Basically means it's never going to cost more than 5 mana, because it's going to come back to your hand. So I think I finally hit the sweet spot of this deck where I have just enough zombie creators, just enough buffs, and just enough drain effects for it to be a really consistent, well-rounded deck. So let me know what you guys think. So as per usual, I'm going to talk about the ramp first. Similar to other videos, I'm not going to talk about the lands. If you want to see what lands I run in this deck, there will be a link to the deck in the description of the video. But I think that lands have a big part of the budget in decks, so I feel like people can kind of choose different land paths based on how much money they want to spend on it. So if you want to see mine, it's in the link at the description below. But as far as ramp goes, one of the best pieces of ramp we actually have in the deck is Ashnod's Altar, and it's a 3 mana artifact, and you can sacrifice a creature to get 2 mana in your mana pool. The reason this is so good is because with the drain effects that we have on some of our creatures and some of the artifacts that we have in the deck, we're going to want our creatures to die at some point. So this is good because it can build us up towards big spells, but it can also be there when we want to drain our table out, or drain the table out because we have enough zombies to do it. Bantu's Monument, a lot of the cards, the creature cards in this deck are black. So this is a 3 mana legendary artifact. Black creature spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. And then whenever you cast a creature spell, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. It's not going to do a ton of work over the game, but it's just nice to have. It's mostly there for the mana reduction on black creature spells. I did win the game once on this because somebody at the table only had 1 life and I cast a spell, so that was pretty fun. But most of the time, this is just out there to reduce the mana cost of stuff. Dimir Signet, Mind Stone, Sky Diamond, Soul Ring, nothing to really say about any of those. Solemn Simulacrum I really like in this deck because if you cast it out of your hand, that's fine. I mean, we're not playing green, so we do need the ramp that it brings us. But if we cast it, or if we exile it from our graveyard and make a copy of it with the Scarab God ability, then we get to ramp, we draw a card when it dies, but it's also a 4/4 zombie, so that's actually pretty good value. So I like this card more when it hits the graveyard, better than when it is in our hand, but it's still a good card. If you have it in your opening hand, you'll probably want to keep it because it's good to ramp. Sword of the Animist. We do have creatures that we can get out there pretty early, like Gravecrawler and a couple other 1-drops. So Sword of the Animist, I think, is a good card if you're not playing green, just so you can keep up with the pace of the table and keep putting lands into play. I like it in this deck. If you don't like it, that's not a problem. Go find another maybe 2 mana artifact ramp spell, but I like Sword of the Animus in this deck. Unstable Obelisk, I've explained this in a couple videos now. I just like this in decks that have trouble getting rid of certain permanents. Black and blue is not very good at getting rid of artifacts or enchantments, so I run this just so I have a way of getting rid of them if I need to. Most of the time it's not going to happen because it itself is 3 mana, and then you have to pay 7 mana and tap it to sacrifice it and destroy a permanent, so that's a lot of stuff that you have to do just to destroy one permanent, but it's just good to have it in the deck in case you need it. And then Wayfarer's Bauble. I think this should go in every deck that doesn't have green in it, just because it's a very good way of ramping up. So now that we've talked about the ramp, let's move on to the card advantage section. Alright, so card advantage. First one I have is Biden Athasa. It's a 4 mana enchantment artifact. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card. 2 colorless, or 2 mana, tap. Creatures your opponents control attack this turn if able. I haven't found a super good situation yet where that second ability has been super effective, but I know that eventually it will. The main reason it's in the deck, obviously, is because we're going to draw cards off this. Some of our zombies are going to be able to get through for damage, and when they do, we're going to fill our hand back up, so that's important. Crypt Breaker is a very good card. I like getting this turn 1. 2 mana tap and discard a card. Put a 2/2 zombie onto the battlefield. So that's really nice because we're putting a zombie into play, and as I said before, we like to make a lot of zombies with this deck. But also, if you have a creature that you want to be in your graveyard, like I mentioned with Solemn Simulacrum, how I like that in my graveyard better than my hand, that's something that you can discard, and then eventually we'll use that effect later with the Scarab God. Also, the tokens don't come in tapped, so if you already have some other zombies out there, you can use Crypt Breaker's second ability, which is tap 3 untap zombies you control. You draw a card and you lose a life. We're not that concerned with losing a life to draw a card. It's Commander. We want cards in our hand. Distant Melody is a 4 mana sorcery. We're going to basically play this and say, I want to draw a card for every zombie I control. And most of the time, we're going to be filling our hand up all the way back up to 7, hopefully more. Fact or Fiction, you might be seeing a theme here. I think I put this basically in every deck I have. I just like this card so much. And in this deck, it's kind of a win-win because we're fine with certain things being in our graveyard because we can use the Scarab God's ability to bring those creatures back. So this card I think is really good and really strong in this deck. Graveborn Muse is maybe the best card in the deck. I don't think people realize it while it's out there, but it is so good. It is 4 mana for a zombie spirit 3/3. At the beginning of your upkeep, draw X cards and lose X life, where X is the number of zombies you control. So this is awesome with the Scarab God, because the Scarab God is already letting us scry X, where it's the number of zombies we control. Now we're drawing that many cards as well because of the Graveborn Muse. And I know that it seems scary that you lose X life. It is scary sometimes. I think of all the games I've played this card. I've probably played this card 20-something times. I've lost one time because I didn't have a way of getting rid of Graveborn Muse, and I drew too many cards and killed myself. That's why we have sack outlets in the deck. Being able to draw that many cards is so worth losing that much life, and people don't get rid of this thing fast enough, and suddenly you have every answer that you need and you take over the game. So this is probably my favorite card in the whole deck. Patient Rebuilding is an enchantment. In my mill video, I talked about this. It can sometimes do very little for you. In this deck, I think it's a little better, just because if people mill creatures, we're not that upset about it. If they have useful enter the battlefield effects, we can use the Scarab God's activated ability to bring them out of the graveyard. So we can abuse creatures as well, but most of the time, I'm still hoping to see land so I can draw cards with this. Phyrexian Arena is an enchantment version of Graveborn Muse, except it caps out at 1. Yeah, and you lose 1 life. So this is a good card. It's harder to get rid of enchantments for most decks, so I like having this card in the deck. Skull Clamp is really good in the early game. and if you have sack outlets later on, it remains really good. Now, the reason I say that is because we have a lot of zombies that have 1 toughness, but we also run a lot of lords that buff our zombies. Normally, when they aren't buffed, we can just pay 1 mana, equip Skull Clamp, the creature will die, and we'll draw 2 cards automatically. But if we don't have a way of getting rid of that creature, and if nobody kills it, we don't get to draw those cards, and that's why we're playing Skull Clamp. So if we have sack outlets later in the game, which we have, I believe there's 4 in the deck, and I'm considering adding another one just because it's pretty important. But as long as you have a sack outlet for this, it's a really good card throughout the whole game. Species Specialist is a 4 mana human warrior. It's not a zombie. As it enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. So for most of the time, we're going to be choosing zombies, but you don't have to. If you anticipate a lot of your friends' cards dying and they're playing Saprolings or Merfolk, you can name that, and then maybe you have a board wipe. Maybe somebody's playing Nevamiral's Disc. You can throw this out there and draw cards for all of the creature type that you've chosen. But for the most part, we're going to be naming zombies, and we do have a way of turning our non-zombie creatures into zombies. And then the last one is Undead Augur. It's basically Species Specialist, except we have to choose zombies, and we're going to lose a life for every card that we draw from it. But because we make so many zombies, this is going to draw us a ton of cards. Alright, let's get to the fun part. Let's make a damn big army. And we'll start it off with Army of the Damned. Alright, 5 colorless, forgive me. I thought that would be funny, but I don't think it is. 5 colorless and 3 black. Create 13 tapped 2/2 black zombie creature tokens. 13 of them. That is a ton of zombies. I had a hand one time where I had only lands and ramp, and I cast this on turn 4 or 5, and the game, nobody had a board wipe. The game just, it was over. I cast the Scarab God next turn, and then, it was a good game, well played. It also has flashback for 7 mana and 3 black. I do like that because we have a few ways that we might mill ourselves, and if this is in the graveyard, we can still cast it eventually once we get to that mana. But also, if we cast it regularly for 8 mana, we can still cast it again while it's in our graveyard. So getting up to 26 zombies off of 1 card, I know it's an expensive card mana-wise, but it does a ton of work. Cemetery Reaper is actually a zombie lord, so it buffs our zombies by +1/+1. It has 2 colorless and a black, and tap it. Exile a creature card from a graveyard. Put a 2/2 black zombie creature token onto the battlefield. This is good graveyard hate in case somebody's playing creatures from their graveyard that you're scared of or that you need to get rid of because they're disrupting what you're doing. So that's good. This most of the time for me, I have better ways of making zombies on the board. So this is just a zombie lord and it just gives everything +1/+1. But it's nice to have in case you need to use it. Diregraph Colossus is a 3 mana zombie giant. It's a 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, you get +1/+1 on it for each zombie in your graveyard. So this thing could come in and be a 2/2. It could also come in and be a 11/11, whatever. But whenever you cast a zombie spell, put a 2/2 black zombie creature token onto the battlefield tapped. With this, we can make so many zombies if it's in our beginning hand. And then we also could play it later on and it can be a massive threat. So very strong card in the deck. Dread Summons is an X spell that if we have extra mana, if we find ourselves in a good position, we can put a lot of mana into this, have everybody mill X cards, and then for each creature card put into a graveyard this way, we make a 2/2 black zombie creature token. This could be really good. Again, it's kind of, you could swing and miss. I like this card though, it's done a lot of work for me in the past. Dreadhorde Invasion is a 2 mana enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 1 life and you amass 1. So amassing is, you have a 0/0 black zombie army token, and then whenever you amass, you put a +1/+1 counter on it. And then it also has, whenever a zombie token you control with power 6 or greater attacks, it gains lifelink until end of turn. We have a lot of lords in this deck, and also with the Scarab God bringing creatures back and they become 4/4 zombies, it's very easy for us. They're also tokens, so it's very easy for us to find zombies being at power 6 or greater, and then we're going to have life linkers, which is nice because you've seen with some of the cards we kind of get a little aggressive with the amount of life we're losing for value, but this could bring us way back up if we have the right stuff in play. Endless Ranks of the Dead is 4 mana. It's an enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, put X 2/2 black zombie creature tokens onto the battlefield, where X is half the number of zombies you control rounded down. This is a good card, but only if you're in an okay to good position. If you have nothing going on and you play this, this is not going to help you, which stinks because it's such a fun effect. But this is basically something that you play when you already have a good hold on the game, and then you completely take over if they can't get rid of this or your zombies, because you just keep reinforcing your troops. It's a good card if you're in a good position, but it's not going to help you very much if you're not set up. Ghoulcaller Gisa, I just added her to the deck, and I'm excited about it. 1 black mana tap, sack another creature, create X 2/2 black zombie creature tokens, where X is the sacrifice creature's power. So what if we brought in a Diregraph Colossus kind of late in the game? It's an 11/11. We'll tap Ghoulcaller Gisa, make 11 zombies. This card can go nuts. It can put so many zombies into play, and you can activate this at instant speed. So if something's going to die anyways, might as well just make zombies out of them. Grave Titan, I love reanimating this with the Scarab God. 4 colorless and 2 black for a 6/6. When it enters the battlefield or attacks, put 2 black zombie creature tokens onto the battlefield. Wow, I think I've been putting these in tapped. They don't even come in tapped. So with the Scarab God, if this is in your graveyard, you can pay 4 mana on the end of someone else's turn. Bring this in, it'll come with 2 zombies, and then when it attacks, you get 2 more. So in one person's turn, basically you have 5 zombies from one thing. Really, really strong card. Josu Ves Lich Knight. 4 mana for a 4/5 menacing zombie. You can kick it, so you can pay a total of 10 mana. And then if you do, you create 8 2/2 black zombie knight creature tokens with menace. I personally like Army of the Damned better because it's 2 less mana for 13 zombies. These zombies do have menace, but we have other forms of evasion. This is a really strong card, though. And you know what? Even for 4 mana, a 4/5 menace, with all the other effects it's going to get from our other zombie lords, this is a strong card. 2 Lilianas. So the first one is Liliana Death's Majesty. Its +1 is we put a zombie into play. That's fantastic. I don't even really care what the other abilities are, but they're good. So we mill ourselves for 2, and we make a zombie. That's its +1. If you can get 3 zombies out of this, that's already worth the value alone, in my opinion. -3 is return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. It's a zombie in addition to its other colors and types. This is nice because I do have a few creatures in this deck that aren't zombies, and it's nice when they are able to get the buffs that our zombies do. So Grave Titan is not a zombie, but if you bring it back with Liliana Death's Majesty, now it is, and it's going to be bigger and scarier. And then -7, destroy all non-zombie creatures. That's great. Beautiful. This card it belongs in every zombie tribal deck, and I think it's great. Liliana, Untouched by Death. I was back and forth between putting this in the deck, and then I thought of one thing, and I'll tell you what it is in a second. 4 mana. It's +1. Put 3 cards from the top of your library into your graveyard. If at least one of them is a zombie, each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. Okay, so I actually put this in the wrong category. This doesn't belong in zombie creators, but -2, target creature gets -X/-X, where X is the number of zombies you control. That's good if we need removal. Maybe someone has something indestructible and we can't get rid of it. This is a good way of getting rid of it. The reason I like this card is because of its -3. You may cast zombie cards from your graveyard this turn. So that by itself is already good. It gives us access to maybe cards that have already died, or we've milled something and we want to play it. But there's a card in this deck called Rooftop Storm, and that lets us play our zombies for 0. Their mana cost is nothing. So if they're in our graveyard and we -3 this Liliana, we can cast every zombie in our graveyard and our hand with Rooftop Storm. And the reason that's amazing is because with the drain effects that we run and sack outlets on 2 of our zombies, we are going to be able to endlessly, it's an endless loop if this happens. I haven't got this to work yet because I just put this in the deck, but you can cast every zombie out of your graveyard, sack them all, and then guess what? They're still free because of Rooftop Storm, and it's still the same turn. So I'm really, really, really excited for when that finally happens, but we'll see if it ever does. Necromancer Stockpile. So this is somewhat similar to the zombie that's 1 mana and you can tap 3 to draw a card. I like this very early in the game because it's 2 mana for an enchantment. Pay 2 mana and discard a card. You also draw a card from this. So if you discard, it has to be a creature card. When you discard a creature card, we like that because with the Scarab God, we can bring it back. If the discarded card was a zombie, put a 2/2 black zombie creature into play. So we have a lot of zombies and we have a lot of zombie effects that we want from the graveyard. This is basically kind of getting a 2-for-1 for 1 zombie spell because we'll be able to bring it back and we're drawing a card from it too. So this is nice if you need, maybe you have something in your hand and you need to hit a land drop. I've paid 2 mana before and discarded a creature and I've been able to hit my land drops because of this card. So it's good for, it's just a good card early in the game. Newscraft Mob is a 6 mana 0/0. When it enters the battlefield, put 5 +1/+1 counters on it. When a player casts a spell, remove a 1/1 counter from Newscraft Mob. If you do, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. So this is good by itself. It's going to make us 5 zombies. It's better with the Scarab God because it comes in from the graveyard not as a 0/0, but as a 4/4, and it has 5/5 or 5 +1/+1 counters on it. So it comes in as a 9/9. So usually what happens is after everyone has decided to cast 5 spells, this thing dies. But now it just stays on the field, and it's just a 4/4 for us. So it's basically 6 zombies, but we're getting way more value out of it. And then Undead Alchemist. This card is really good. I don't have any infinite combos in this deck with this card, but if we're at a point in the game where we feel that having more zombies is better than actually doing damage with them, Undead Alchemist can help us put a ton of zombies into play. And again, this is just another card in the deck that makes it so having a sack outlet is essential, because it's not fun to build up an entire army, be able to kill everyone, but then not actually be able to do it because you're not going to be doing damage. You're going to be milling people instead. So this card is situational. It can be really good, but it also can be a nuisance. So just be safe when you're playing this card. All right, we did it. We have a ton of zombies. Now let's do some damage with them. Death Baron is a 3 mana zombie wizard. Skeletons, we don't care about skeletons. Zombies you control get +1/+1 and have death touch. +1/+1 is always nice. We always welcome that. Death touch. People are not going to want to block our zombies when they're death touching. That's huge. We're going to get a lot more damage through because of this. And also we can hold up blocks for big scary creatures. Keep in mind, Death Baron itself does not have the +1/+1 or death touch. So be careful with this card. Don't attack in with it thinking that it does, because it's going to die and you're going to be sad about it. Diregraph Captain. This could have gone into the drain effects, but I just think it's the captain of zombies. It's a zombie buff. It's a zombie lord. It itself has death touch, which is nice. That's mattered for me a couple times with this card specifically. Other zombies you control get +1/+1. Whenever another zombie you control dies, target opponent loses 1 life. Obviously, I wish that was each opponent loses 1 life, but still target opponent, that still matters. Eternal Skylord is a 5 mana zombie wizard, and it's a 3/3. When it enters the battlefield, amass 2. So assuming that you haven't amassed yet, this is a 5 mana. 5 mana, you get 2 zombies. But guess what? Zombie tokens you control have flying. So for 5 mana, just by itself, you have a 3/3 and a 2/2 flying zombie. That I think that's great value. But also now all of our zombie tokens can fly. We can block. Finally, we can block those flying creatures because I'll tell you what, zombies, although they have a few flying zombies, I don't like any of them. I don't think they're worth their mana cost for the most part. Maybe I'm wrong. This one is. This one we like. So I love this card in the deck. Making the zombies be able to fly is huge, and I'm very happy this card got printed. Gleaming Overseer is arguably better than Eternal Skylord. It's 3 mana. When it enters the battlefield, amass 1. Again, we're getting 2 bodies. This is only 3 mana, we're getting 2 bodies. That's pretty good. Zombie tokens you control have hexproof, and if that wasn't enough, they also have menace. In most zombie decks that don't have the Scarab God, hexproof on your zombie tokens, it's a zombie token, so you're not, unless you're like trying to prevent like one spot removal of a zombie token, it's not that big of a deal. With the Scarab God, you can get some great effects, and you can get some great creatures back out of your library or out of your graveyard. And now they come back into play and they have hexproof. If you bring this thing back with the Scarab God's ability, now it's a 4/4. It comes in with a body, and it itself has hexproof. So very, very, very strong card in the deck. Liliana's Mastery. I was back and forth between, is this a zombie creator or a zombie buff? It does both. It makes 2 zombies. Basically, you pay 5 mana, you get 2 3/3s, assuming there aren't already buffs out there. Undead War Chief. First of all, this card is disgusting. Disgustingly good, and I think it might be the ugliest creature in Magic history. Second, maybe to Fleshbag Marauder, the meatball version. I'll try to put a picture on there if I can find it, but this card is gross. Zombie spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. Great. It's kind of ramping us because now our spells cost less. Zombie creatures you control get +2/+1? That's very scary. Our normally 2/2 zombie tokens have now become 4/3s. That's big enough to kill rhinos and beasts. Also, it itself is a zombie, so unless this is changed in more recent printings or something, I believe he just comes in as a 4/3. So that's fantastic. Whip of Erebos. 90% of the time I use this, I have not used the ability. I just like it that the zombies have lifelink, because I've said that we get a little bit risky with losing life. We can gain so much life back. We have so much power with that many creatures on the board that even if we attack in and so many of them die, we're going to gain so much life from it that it doesn't really matter all that much. And we have ways of getting creatures back really quickly, as you've seen with some of the zombie creators we have. And so I've mentioned that we have a couple effects that let us discard cards. If you have this card in your starting hand and you are trying to figure out what to discard, get rid of Wonder. Because now, as long as you control an island and it's in your graveyard, all your creatures have flying. All of them. Not just zombie tokens, but all your creatures. The Scarab God is flying too. So I think this is a really strong card. I've taken it out of the deck, and I died, I think, 2 or 3 times to flying creatures, and now it is never leaving the deck. So it is good, and you're going to be happy that it's in there, I promise, when you put it in your deck. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about 2 different sections because these are kind of smaller ones. The first one is removal. First one is a 2-mana instant, return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. Then that player discards a card if you control a zombie. We're probably going to have a zombie out there. The reason I like this card is because it's any non-land permanent. So if somebody has a Beastmaster Ascension or any of the Ascension cards that have tokens on them, or the quest counters on them, or they just have a problem coming your way, this is a good way of not only putting it in their hand, but if by the magic gods, by the grace of the magic gods, it's the only card that's now in their hand, and they have to discard it. That's never happened for me. That's, as some people say, that's magical Christmas land, but I like to think that, you know what, that might happen eventually. Grimgrin Corpseborn. I've been on the edge of taking this out or keeping it in. It's so good at removing creatures. The reason I keep it, though, is because it is a sack outlet on a creature. 3 colorless, 1 blue and a black for a zombie warrior for a 5/5. When it enters the battlefield, it enters tapped and doesn't untap during your untap step. Sack another creature. Untap Grimgrin and put a +1/+1 counter on it. Whenever it attacks, destroy target creature defending player controls. Then put a +1/+1 counter on it. So the reason I've been back and forth on taking it out is because it's 5 mana, and 90% of the time, the way our board is set up, I would rather cast the Scarab God than this. But when it is on the battlefield, it's very good. It's very strong, because you can get rid of creatures that you don't want to be there, and it gets to be a huge beater, and it's a sack outlet. Kindred Dominance. Wow, this card has jumped up in price, it looks like. It is 7 mana, choose a creature type, destroy all creatures that aren't the chosen type. So this is great if you have a board, and this is great if you don't. If you have a board, you're going to say you want to keep your zombies, and you're going to keep your zombies. Sometimes you could say you want to keep your gods in case you only have a couple zombies and you'd rather keep the Scarab God out there. The last time I actually played this, I think I wanted to choose... I chose snails because I didn't have any creatures out there. So all non-snail creatures died. So the board was wiped. It's a good card. Living Death at times can be really good in this deck, but depending on how much mill and discarding and creatures have died in the game for you, you might not have very many creatures to bring back with this. But other games, you're going to have a ton of creatures to bring back with this. This card by itself and cards in my graveyard have won me a few games. So it's a really strong card, but it's not as effective in a strictly self-mill strategy. It's situationally good, obviously. Meteor Golem. 7 mana in my book is not a great price to destroy a non-land permanent for a 3/3. So I don't like casting this from my hand. I do think it's fine to pay 4 mana for this. It destroys a permanent and becomes a 4/4 zombie. So I like this a lot with the Scarab God. Obviously, much like Unstable Obelisk, dire situations, you can cast this for 7 mana if you need to get rid of something. But for the most part, this is way better with the Scarab God. Noxious Ghoul. Setting the board up correctly for... So if you have zombies... Whoops. If you have zombies out there, this is great because this comes in at -1/-1s all non-zombie creatures. But if you have ways of putting creatures out after this is out there, that's great because your zombies don't care. Put as many zombies out there as you want. But, unfortunately, the Scarab God itself is not a zombie 90% of the time. We have a way of turning it into one, but basically, you can wipe the board, your opponent's boards with this, but you might lose some of the pieces that you want, so just be careful when you play this card. Now we go on to Graveyard Love. Altar of Dementia. If your creatures are going to die, sack them, mill yourself, fill your graveyard up, then cast Living Death. Really strong card. I don't even have words for it. I just really like this card. Carrion Feeder. It's a 1-mana zombie, and it is a sack outlet on a creature. We can bring this back if we need to. We have ways of putting creatures into our graveyard to bring it back. We could tutor for this card if we really need a sack outlet, and this is the most efficient one. Gisa and Geralf. This was originally the commander I had for this deck probably 5 years ago, and it's just gone through so many changes. But I kept it in here. One, I kind of think it's nostalgia because this card is not fantastic, but at the same time, it can be good. So when it enters, mill yourself for 4. We're fine with that. We like that. We like cards in our graveyard. During each of your turns, you may cast a zombie creature card from your graveyard. I really, really, really wish it was during each of your turns, you may cast zombie cards, zombie creature cards, not just one. The way it's written, that's only one zombie. That stinks. If you could cast a bunch of them, that'd be great. But we do have zombies that die, and we're going to want to get them back. So I keep it in the deck. I think it's probably nostalgia, but it also has some value. And Gravecrawler. If Graveborn Muse isn't the best card in the deck, this 1-mana creature that can't block anything probably is. You can cast this from your graveyard as long as you control a zombie. With some setup, this card has a few ways of going infinite, which I didn't set the deck up to do. It's just a synergy that ended up happening. As I've talked about Rooftop Storm, basically, if you have Rooftop Storm out there and a sack outlet and a drain effect, you can drain the whole table with this because you can keep casting it from the graveyard. You can also, if Diregraph Colossus is out there, you can make a million zombies. Also, Skull Clamp with this card is really good. You can just always have it on the battlefield, so you're always going to have a zombie as long as you can play it out of your graveyard. Okay, so now we have another section that's made up of two smaller sections. So the first one is Drain. This, if you're not going to win with combat damage, you're winning with Drain, and actually it happens like 50-50, which I like about this deck. I don't know how I'm going to win most of the time I start playing it. Depends on what I draw and what I come across in the game. So, Grey Merchant of Asphodel, otherwise known as Gary, is a huge win con in this deck. When it enters the battlefield, each opponent loses X life, where X is your devotion to black. You gain life equal to the life lost this way. Really like this card as well because this is something that has saved me several times. I can cast this from the graveyard or with the Scarab God, and I can stay alive because it gains us life. Really strong card in the deck. I'll talk about this one next. Plague Belcher and Vengeful Dead. I mentioned a drain effect earlier that affects only one opponent. These affect all opponents at the same time. These are great. So if you have both of these out there and one zombie dies, guess what? Each opponent's losing 2 life. You're going to have way more than just one zombie to sack. So if you have 10, maybe 15 zombies, each opponent's going to be losing 20 or 30 life. Very strong cards. I think if the Scarab God could have a best friend in the world, it would be the Lich Lord of Unks. I think that's how you say that. It is a 3-mana zombie wizard. First ability, you can pay Dimir and tap it to put a 1/1 blue-black zombie wizard creature token into play. That's nice. I don't think I've ever used it. It's nice that it's there if you need it, though. Its second ability, 2 blue and 2 black, target player loses X life and puts X cards from the top of their library into their graveyard, where X is the number of zombies you control. You will be controlling a ton of zombies, and guess what? You don't need to tap it to do this. You can do this multiple times in a turn if you have the mana for it. Unfortunately, it's color specific. You need exactly 2 blue and exactly 2 black. You can't sack things to Ashnod's Altar to get extra mana, but this card has won me so many games just by gunning people down, draining their life away. And then we have 4 tutors in the deck, just because I like to keep the deck consistent. Buried Alive, it's just an all-star in this deck. You can find creatures that will help progress your board state. You can find creatures that will help get you out of a jam. Really good card, and it's only 3 mana. You can play this pretty early in the game and set yourself up for your later turns. Corpse Connoisseur. This is my least favorite tutor in the deck, unfortunately. It's a good card. It comes into play, find a creature, put it into your graveyard. You could do it again with Unearth, or you can use the Scarab God ability on this to go ahead and just make a 4/4 version of it and get the same effect. It's a zombie. It's good. If I had to cut a tutor out, though, I think it would be this one just because it's one creature, it's 5 mana, and it goes to your graveyard. Entomb, however, is 1 mana, it's instant, and you can find any card in your library. I don't know why we would want to find something that's not a creature, now that I think about it, but Entomb can be very deadly because you can hide something from your opponents. Say you have the 1 mana floating, and maybe you have the Scarab God out there, but people don't see anything that scary in your graveyard, so they're kind of just letting it sit there. Then you get to play for 1 mana at the end of someone's turn, find whatever you want, Grave Titan, I love to find Graveborn Muse, put that into your graveyard, and then bring it back with the Scarab God. And then the last tutor is a 5 mana, it's Sidisi Undead Vizier. It's a 4/6 Death Touch. I did not realize this card for the longest time was a 4/6. It's a big threat. So it's a 4/6 Death Touch. It has Exploit. You're going to have something to sacrifice. I usually keep this around, to be honest, just because it's such a big body. I'll sack it later if I need to search for something else. But if you exploit something, you can search your library for a card and put it into your hand and shuffle your library. So yeah, you can exploit it if you need to, but you're almost always going to have another target if you want. So these are the cards that, you know, when you draw them, they're just there to help you find pieces that you need to make the deck keep humming and doing what you want it to do. As with most of my deck techs, I find myself having a handful of cards that I don't really know where to put them. This time I've decided to name those handful of cards Good Stuff. So the first card in Good Stuff is Conspiracy. Maybe people wouldn't like this card. I do because, let me read what it does first. It's 5 mana. It stinks that it's 5 mana. I wish it was less. But as it comes into play, choose a creature type. Creature cards that you own that aren't in play, creature spells you control, and creatures you control, yeah, all of those, are the chosen type. I choose zombies, and now, guess what? With Gisa and Geralf, we can now cast any creature that we have from our graveyard, because creatures that we own that aren't in play, that includes our graveyard, that includes our library, we can cast them now because everything's a zombie. With Noxious Ghoul, everything gets a -1/-1 that's not a zombie. But guess what? Now all of our creatures are zombies instead of what they were before. The Scarab God triggers on its own effect. Species Specialist is a zombie now. It triggers on its own effect as well. And every card, by the way, that's doing this is now getting the buffs from our zombie lords that they weren't previously. I really like this card. I understand if you don't want to play it though, because it's 5 mana, and that's the same price as the Scarab God. So sometimes I look at this in my hand and say, if only I could play you right now, but I need to do some other stuff. Lazotep Plating is a 2 mana instant that gives permanents you control and yourself hexproof until the end of the turn. I think that the fact that it gives permanents but also yourself hexproof is very strong, because that could prevent you from taking damage if it's an X spell targeted at one person, or maybe they want you to discard your hand and you don't want to discard your hand. You can do that, and it also amasses one. So it's a 2 mana instant. You can throw this, maybe something big and scary is coming at you and you need a blocker and you don't have one. Make yourself hexproof and then throw a tiny little 1/1 army in front of it and hope that it saves the day. It's a good card. I think it's been very useful for me. Lightning Greaves. It's Lightning Greaves. We want the Scarab God to stick around. Yes, it will never cost us more than 5 mana unless it gets exiled. But why keep casting it when you could just keep it out there? And also it gives it haste. So creatures that you put into play, they can attack that turn if you have something big that you want to swing with. And finally, the aforementioned Rooftop Storm. It is 5 colorless and a blue for an enchantment, but oh my goodness, read what it does. You may pay 0 rather than pay the mana cost for zombie creature spells you cast. Wait, they don't cost anything, but with Conspiracy, all of our creatures cost nothing because everything's a zombie. It's great. This is a card that I tutor for, and once it's out there, you can dump your hand. It is so good. As I've already mentioned, it can lead to a couple infinite combos, or there's just combos you can win the game with this card. It's really strong. When people read it the first time, I don't think they truly understand that it doesn't just make the first time I read it, what I read it as was you may pay 0 colorless mana rather than pay the mana cost of zombie spells. And I took that as you still had to pay the colored cost. For some reason, that's just how I looked at it. But a few people I've played with have felt the same way. No, zombies are free to cast. It's an insane card, and if you're playing Zombie Tribal, I strongly recommend it because this card has gone nuts for me in the past. Wow, that's a lot of zombies. I hope you guys liked the video. If you have a zombie deck and you run different cards, please let me know what you have because I would love to see what other people play. This is a deck that I really love because I've just been playing it for so long, and over the years I've had some really good memories playing it. But what do you guys think? Do you think I could do better? Do you think you'd rather see more infinite combos? Would you rather I sneak in a Phyrexian Altar for more infinite combos with Gravecrawler? Or do you like where it's at? Let me know what your favorite tribe is to play. Mine, obviously, is zombies. But what do you like to play? Elves? Vampires? Fish? Let me know what let me know what tribes you guys like to play in the comments below. And thank you for watching today.